Following program are pre-recorded.
Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk 1270, your tune to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Bakken along with Brad Feldman from the Bismarck Bobcats. And Brad, Aberdeen last week split, which anytime you split on the road, it's usually a good thing. But what I really noticed from the game was probably some depth issues. And that all comes back for you guys just aren't that healthy right now.
Yeah, we're kind of dealing with an injury bug, a couple concussions here and there, whatever injuries the guys are dealing with, right? But, it's a long season. We're, a couple months into this thing. Bumps and bruises, man. It's a physical game, so you're going to have to deal with that. The best teams rise to the top, and the best teams are the ones that are able to overcome that and continue to win.
So at this point in the season and, going back, you're pretty hard-pressed to find a Bobcats team that, at least on the win-loss column, looks as good as this team does. It's hard to find that. It's just all the good teams that the Bobcats have ever had, it's like, hey, the record speaks, right? And there's always that old adage. It's like, doesn't matter. A win's a win. Doesn't matter if it's pretty ugly or however you're doing it. And most of them have been pretty pretty. But when you start getting injuries, it's like, okay, it's grinding time. And it's just get the win and then let's get healthy. And what are some of the timelines on some of the players coming back?
I'm not even sure on the timelines of some of them. I know I did hear in the office say some of them are going to be coming back this weekend, so that's a good sign. But I think here's the biggest thing. I think the fact that the boys have continued to win. We only have 2 regulation losses on the year. We have 1 shootout loss on the year. I think it just goes to show the depth that this year's Bobcat team has, like you had mentioned. The hockey ops side between Garrett, Lane, Nico, Wade Chido. They've done an absolute fantastic job getting the right players in here that fit the model and what we want to do here and just continue to win and put wins in the win column.
You mentioned the depth side of that, and, part of having some injuries is, you want to have a little depth, but this is, from the beginning, has been a really deep team this year. You don't want to go too deep in with injuries and players being out, but the depth has really served itself well. But that's also something that's going to serve itself later in the season when you start grinding into those dog days of a long winter. And, you get players that get a little seasoned early in the year. That's got to be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. I talked to some of the staff that we have here, game ops staff that we've been around for quite a while now. We talk all the time, when this guy gets back off of being injured or this guy gets back off of being injured, who exactly are you going to sit? Which guy on this team should be taken out of the lineup on a daily basis because this guy's now healthy? That's a tough decision. I'm glad Garrett's the one that has to deal with that because I would struggle with that one. But, you look all the way, line 1, 2, 3, 4, you have high-quality players at every position that can make an impact on any given night.
Well, that's the other side of a healthy scratch. A lot of guys will go, okay, well, you're looking on the outside looking in going, okay, why is a player a healthy scratch? And they start questioning the player, especially when you're at the upper echelons, right, looking down on when you're doing recruiting. And the Bobcats are in a position where it's like, well, we're going to have some healthy scratches, and it's not because of anything that player's doing. It's just we're that deep. And that has got to be a hard decision for one, but kind of a good position to be in for Garrett and the rest of the staff.
Yeah, that's the thing is if you're a healthy scratch, you're looking at this lineup and you're watching them play on a Friday, Saturday night, week after week going, okay, well, what do I have to do to try to crack this lineup? And that's a tough question to answer for a lot of these guys that haven't been playing. How do you crack a lineup that only has 3 losses on the year?
It's a good luxury to have.
Deal to try to get an answer to.
it's not a problem. It's a luxury at that point. But it also
Absolutely
makes a lot of players work a little bit harder, too, because you're right. You got to crack that lineup. All right, coming into this weekend, again, the Bobcats are on the road. And, of course, you can follow all the Bobcats games right here on your home of the Bobcats, Super Talk 1270. What are we knowing about Watertown Shamrocks?
Watertown being a new team, we knew that they would have some struggles, obviously, just getting acclimated to the NAHL and the level of play. We've beat them every single time we've played them this year. So it's going to be a fun time. It's our last trip down to Watertown because we only have to go there twice. Brand new arena. Everything I hear is it's amazing. So luckily I'll be down. I'll be like 30 miles away from there for a kids hockey tournament. So I'm going to try to make the trip up and check it out.
Yeah, I heard the facilities down there are pretty nice, so you'll have to give us an update on that later. But what have some of the matchups looked like? Because you mentioned they're a new team, so they're young, they're getting acclimated. The Bobcats have handled them in previous meetings. What's the strategy or the thought process going into this weekend's game? Because anytime you're playing a team on the road, they've got that home ice advantage, and I don't think there's any team that lacks for fan support around the NAHL. So you got to be a little leery going into somebody else's barn.
Yeah, you always have to because, their fans, from what I hear, their fans are pretty excited. They have a team, they're trying to get behind them, and they're building a nice fan base down there. I hear Garrett talk all the time, just, pressure the puck, play our game, stay within our system, all that kind of stuff. It's all the coaches 101 stuff, right? But the biggest thing is, just go down, play your game. And, it's been successful so far. We've beat them, 6 times, I believe. So, no, we beat them 4 times. Sorry. So you beat them 4 times. So go back down there. You have a recipe for success. Just go repeat that.
Well, looking forward to a great weekend for the Bobcats on the road, taking on the Watertown Shamrocks, new team in the NAHL. And, they're another one of those teams that in proximity is close enough to really could spark a pretty good rivalry, kind of like Aberdeen and Minot have done. We travel well. We bring players. We bring fans. When we talk about the Bobcat team going on the road, those closer games like that, it's an opportunity for the Bobcat family to go on the road, and the Bobcats really travel well.
Yeah, we do. The fans are so excited. I know there were some down in Minnesota, down by the cities of Forest Lake. I know they were down there a couple weekends ago. So, yeah, I expect to see some Bobcat fans down there this weekend if I'm there. There's a Bismarck youth hockey team not far from there, so maybe that'd be a fun time to go to a game.
Oh, yeah, it'll be a good time. So best of luck on the road. Of course, you can catch all the games right here on your home of the Bobcats, Super Talk 1270. Brad, best of luck this weekend with both your kids' tournament and the Bobcats down in Watertown.
Yep, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brad Feldman with the Bismarck Bobcats. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk.
Experience holiday cheer at Tanger Outlets with savings up to 70% off your favorite brands. From fragrances to accessories and the latest styles, discover the best gifts for everyone on your list. Save big at Nike Factory Store, Michael Kors, Under Armour, Coach, Polo Ralph Lauren, Kate Spade New York, and so many more. Unwrap the best at Tanger Outlets. Hundreds of brands, endless gifting options. Plan your trip at Tanger.com.
Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk 1270, you're tuned to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Bakken. Joining us in the studio, Rebecca Binstock with the Ethics Commission. And a lot of talk about ethics with what's coming up with the next session. And it's always a conversation because really the Ethics Commission is something newer in North Dakota. And Rebecca, why don't you give our listeners a little bit of a background for the Ethics Commission? And then I want to get into why it's important, that educational piece now, because it's about education. I mean, people don't know if they're doing something ethically wrong with the way the statutes, as you've got new legislatures coming in. And we do have a lot of turnover now with term limits. So it's about an educational process. And I want to get into that, but a little background on the Ethics Commission.
Perfect. Well, good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me. So let's talk about the Ethics Commission in general. So the North Dakota Ethics Commission was formed from an initiated measure, right? We had an initiated measure back in 2018. It was on the ballot. The voters passed it. They approved it. It became effective in 2019. Then in 2019, we had 5 commissioners that were appointed. So the individuals who serve on the Ethics Commission are appointed by a consensus agreement, a little bit unique, not majority, consensus agreement of the governor, Senate Majority Leader, and Senate Minority Leader. So we have 5 commissioners that are appointed in 2019, and then they get to start doing their work, right?
So a little background, when the initiated measure fired up, I mean, because it's kind of something you take for granted a little bit. It's like, well, why do we need an ethics commission? Because it's North Dakota. Shouldn't we be ethical to begin with?
We should be ethical
we
to begin
should be,
with. Yes, absolutely.
But it was, some of it was some of the lobbying pieces, and people were having concerns that, is the legislator, because you got to remember, this is back before term limits.
Yep.
And was it a club, or, are we getting the best value? Were people doing things that they just don't know about? And that's where the education piece comes in. But you got to have an ethics commission to be able to do that education.
Right. So I think back, if you look before the initiated measure, there was a lot of we don't know. Right.
Yeah.
We don't have,
gray area.
we don't have, and we didn't have information, right? We didn't have a way to disclose stuff. There wasn't a way to process certain complaints or certain issues, right? So there was a lot of, I think, unknown. And then whenever you have unknown, it creates uncertainty and questions, and then you start asking a lot of questions, right? And then you did have things that were popping up in the media that were problems. And so then you can people would take those and then run with it, let's say, right? So with the Ethics Commission coming into place, let's fast forward. So what did the voters put it into place? What does it actually do, right?
It's about setting up standards and rules so people, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, if you're in politics, if you don't know the rules of the game, then there's an opportunity to blur some lines, whether intentional or not.
Whether intentional or not.
And that is the education piece of the Ethics Commission, because it's here. There's no gray area. You know where the line is, and you don't cross it.
Yep. So that is really what the Ethics Commission is all about, right? Is providing that education. So we do have an investigative arm, right, where we can investigate things that come into our office. But primarily what we want to focus on is preventing issues and making sure that people have the information ahead of time so that they can make more ethical, better decisions, right?
Make sure they're educated so that, am I getting a cup of coffee from somebody I shouldn't be getting a cup of coffee?
Right. Or something else. Am I voting on
Yeah.
something that I should be voting on? Is it okay that I take this action, right? And so, before we had the Ethics Commission, and even before recently, the educational component, there was not a lot of education for state public officials, legislators. So as the Ethics Commission really came into its own, we want to talk about and provide educational resources. So that can be done, and we do it through a variety of ways. So the very first thing that we have is we do webinars. We talk about, we have educational sessions that are an hour-long discussion on a topic, okay? So that is one of the first things that we put out. You can listen to those on our website. Those are available to everybody. So the other thing that we've done is we've made information hopefully accessible, meaning that you can access it if you need it.
Well, there's
and that's
kind
for
of 3 components to this. So, and we're talking about the legislature coming into session now.
Yes, legislature's coming into session.
The legislators being able to go, okay, I have a question, and being able to go and look at those guidelines. But the media as well to know, if you're going to go chase a story down, was something ethical? Is there a violation there or not?
Yep.
And then the public, because it's about the constituents, and having that knowledge as a voter and a constituent and a taxpayer and resident of North Dakota is very valuable too, because I'm a big proponent. People should be doing their homework, and there's some accountability, and you should know what is right and wrong, especially today with social media, because good Lord, something can get off the rails in a hurry because it's rumor and conjecture and it's not factual and stuff can go in different directions because of social media today. So having the ability to know all the information, and as the Ethics Commission has really turned into an educational resource, I like the direction you guys are going.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of trepidation when the Ethics Commission first was created.
Yeah, they were concerned, a lot of individuals were concerned that it would be this gotcha kind of entity, that it could be politically weaponized, that sort of thing.
Correct.
And that's still, we have to address some of those concerns and some of those issues on the investigation side. But it really comes down to providing information to the stakeholders, like you talked about, the public, the media, public officials, right? And how we do that really comes down to what, especially as we are moving into legislative session, right? That we are pushing forward with that. So also keep in mind that as we are doing education, so just to kind of give you an idea, so far this fall, right? We are currently in the organizational session, right? Organizational session is here right now. And so we've been doing education specifically with legislators. So that's been our focus for the last few days. Let's give them the information that they need to know, best practices, and let's not do it in a big auditorium, bring them all in. We want to have one-on-one conversations. We want to have small groups. So we've been doing that. We also provide a lot of information to them ahead of time so that they know. And also that quick guidance, right? Informal guidance, like, hey, should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this?
Where's my crib notes?
Yeah, where's my notes? What do I need to do? So we've tried to create kind of workable things because they're not legislators, 100% of the time, right? Or they're new. So we try to provide them with those resources.
And as a quote-unquote citizen legislature, which I'll debate at times, but you do have people working in the private sector and doing other things, and there is an opportunity, whether intentional or not, for the private side to bleed into the legislative side, and they need to know that.
Yes, yeah. And I think that a lot of individuals who serve in the legislature that have that are aware of that, and that's one of the things that we're talking about.
We're talking with Rebecca Minstock with the North Dakota Ethics Commission. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Don't miss a Hannity Show.
I know that there is a segment of society that would love a perpetual shutdown, and I guess we could live in a bubble, but who's going to build the bubble if everybody shuts down?
Weekday afternoons starting at 2 on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk 1270, you're tuned to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Bachman along with Rebecca Binstock with the North Dakota Ethics Commission. We're talking about ethics, new session coming in, a lot of new legislators coming in after the first of the year with the session, and a lot to know, a lot to learn for them, for the media, for the public when it comes to ethics. One of the questions I've been asked fairly recently is if somebody were to have an ethics question or think there's a violation, what's the process of who do I report this to? Who do I talk to? Do you just call up the North Dakota Ethics Commission, go, hey, I have a concern. Does this fit the criteria? Is it as simple as that, or what's the process?
Yeah, great question, Steve. You know what? It is as simple as that. So the Ethics Commission can take a complaint in from a North Dakota resident in really any form. It can be a phone call. There is a hotline that people can submit tips through. That number is available on our website. There's also a form, an online form that somebody can submit through our website as well. We've made that pretty user-friendly so that you can attach documents if you need to, submit information. Or if you're not sure, you can just call and ask us. So we have staff available. The Ethics Commission doesn't have jurisdiction or authority over local officials. That's probably one of the questions we get the most frequently.
Yeah, where's the bottom end? Where's the line?
Who do you guys investigate? Alleged violations against, and so we
and it's
don't.
The state level.
And it's state level, so it is state level. So
okay,
we
but
do have
casting
that.
the net statewide, then that could go into higher education. That could go into legislators. That could be Commerce Department, any
Yep.
state agency, that's under your jurisdiction.
So there's some exceptions. So it's going to be, the definition or the word is public officials, anybody who's a public official. So this is going to be anybody who's elected, right? This is going to be our legislators, our statewide elected individuals, anybody in the executive branch who's appointed. So that's going to include cabinet members and then individuals who serve in the executive branch who are appointed, right? So there's certain individuals such as myself. I'm not in the executive branch. We're in this independent ethics commission, but I am appointed to serve in my role, right? So it also is going to include individuals who serve on the ethics commission. They included themselves within that. They have to follow the rules. And then it's going to include legislative employees. So there are general executive branch employees who are serving in the state. They are going to be excluded. So it is limited to the number of people. Or the individuals. So, but let's say that somebody does have a complaint or a question. They're not quite sure. They can come to us. They can talk to us about it. If they do want to move ahead and file a complaint with the commission, it really is, it's a 3-step process. And it requires us to initially review something once it comes in and say, hey, can we even be looking at this? Is this something?
Step one is you're required to... If somebody has a question, you're required to assess that.
Yep.
And I can imagine a lot of cases because of lack of education, people go, hey, I think there's something here, a violation. And when you go through it, it's like, that doesn't meet the criteria.
Right. We do a lot of that.
Right. And so, again, upfront, diffusing what could have been something that was blown out of proportion and not accurate, because it's about being accurate and having the right information. So
it is, yes. Yeah. So we can do that right away. We can handle things that aren't within our jurisdiction. We can get rid of them pretty quickly. Then we are left with moving toward, so we review it. We say, yep, this is something that the Ethics Commission can look into. No, it's not. If it isn't something the Ethics Commission can look into, there might be another local entity or a county commission, city commission that something should go to. And we do, let people know who come to us.
So getting things to the right place is very important,
Part of it is getting things to the right place. Now, we can't provide them legal advice, but we can certainly say, hey, maybe talk to this person. Let's go there. The second step is trying to informally resolve anything that happens. So we're required under the statute to try to informally resolve. What we have learned over the course of the last 4 years in dealing with this is that is not the easiest process, because you have a complainant who is concerned and may see something that they don't like, and it's hard to get that done. We have been successful on a few occasions, but then at that point, if we can't resolve something, then we move into more of an investigation stage, right? Where we are fact gathering, where we are interviewing people, we're taking depositions, we're moving towards that. So then we can create a report. Now, I will tell you that the commission is actually looking to change this process just a little bit to get away from some of the negative connotation, because there is an education component even in that process, that somebody could have done something that they didn't even realize they shouldn't have done really early on, and they would have been able to correct it and say, hey, if I would have known that, I wouldn't have done it. So we're trying to
kind of a remediation process.
Yes, absolutely. We're trying to build in that education into this process. So expect some changes in the coming session for how that process looks in an effort to almost streamline it.
So when you're looking at a complaint coming in, it's first of all, is it a complaint? Mm-hmm. Second of all, is it going in the right place that it needs to go to?
Yep.
And then the third part is, okay, there's something here and there's an investigation that takes place now.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct.
So what does an investigation look like?
Yep. So an investigation is going to look very similar to a civil case, right? Where we gather documents from places, whether it is private citizens, whether it is other state agencies. We're going to be conducting interviews with people. We're going to be requesting records, those sorts of things, asking questions of people so that we can then get a full picture of what happened. Sometimes that can be pretty short, right? Something happened, very direct, involves few people. Sometimes that's bigger. And so then at the end, as executive director, I produce a report that the commission and the individual who who we are, investigating. I don't want to use that kind of negative connotation, but that is in this process that they are both provided. And so then from there, the commission decides if that is an ethical violation or if it is not an ethical violation.
And, okay, we know what happens if it's not. What happens if it is?
What happens if it is? So there are certain circumstances where there's fines or penalties that are associated with those, and that's laid out. Some of the other things is if there is an ethical violation, the fact that there is an ethical violation, is in fact the consequence, right? That there is now a public finding out there that something shouldn't have happened, right?
And an ethical violation can reach different levels as well. Because it's like, did somebody take a cup of coffee from somebody they shouldn't have?
Yep.
Or is it more intensive than that? So I can imagine there's a great big spectrum.
There is. Yeah. So there is a spectrum. And then the other thing is that the commission can actually refer its findings to another state entity once it's done. So if it needs to hand it over to, the Secretary of State to do some auditing, or to a county commission, or, I can't imagine a time when that would come up, but another state entity.
Yeah, it really could.
It could.
Rebecca Binstock, Executive Director of North Dakota Ethics Commission. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Oh, Super Talk.
Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk 1270, you're tuned to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Bach, along with Rebecca Binstock, Executive Director of North Dakota Ethics Commission. And we're talking about education with the session coming in. There's a couple different components of that, having the legislators and state elected office holders being educated on the ethics rules, because whether intended or not, it's important that they know what the guidelines for having good ethics in the legislature or your office are. But there's some other components to that too. It's the media, it's the public, the constituents, knowing what an ethics violation is, because in today's day and age, not being educated on something, you run the risk of, something splattered all over social media, so it must be true, right? That's how that works, right? If something's on social media, it's got to be fact, right? But that's one of the things that the Ethics Commission protects against, and it all comes back to education.
It all comes back to education. So when we talk about the mission of the Ethics Commission, it is to increase transparency. Right? It all comes down to increasing transparency. So we are providing more data, more disclosures, having meeting notices filed, those sorts of things. But then, so we provide an avenue for that, but it also requires participation from the voters, from the public citizens, to be able to go and say, yep, I'm going to use that information that they're providing. So I always like to say that ethics commissions alone don't create an ethical government. It is the relationship between ethics commissions, their public officials, and the citizens, and the media. The media plays a portion in that too.
Very large role.
That they all have to come together. And so as we talk about education, it is just as important for us to educate the public, the North Dakota citizen, about what your role is, what our mission is, what we are here to help with, and what your role is, what you can do, what you should look out for, what aren't concerns, what are concerns, the do's and the don'ts, right? Because they play that crucial, if you talk about a stool, right, it's the third leg that you gotta have that interaction. And so we reach out to, and we want to make sure that we provide education to the public as well as to our elected officials. So we're doing that next week.
You got an event coming up.
So we got an event coming up. So on December 9th, we are at the Heritage Center at 6 p.m., and we have an event that is open to all North Dakota residents. There's no registration. It's free. And really, we are going to talk about the basics. We're going to talk about ethics basics, Ethics Commission basics. What are the rules? What are the do's? What are the don'ts as we go into legislative session? If you are involved in the legislature, meaning that you're an observer, you're testifying, you are providing support, you're working with a nonprofit, what do you need to know going in?
Or like in a lot of cases, municipalities are going there to deal with, which aren't really under your purvey, but they're having interaction with elected officials. So it's important that they know the rules as well. I can imagine lobbyists should probably know.
Yep.
Well,
yes.
So you work independently with incoming legislators and the legislators that are coming in. Do you work with the lobbyists too, going, hey, here's all the rules?
Yep. So we actually break our education out into stakeholders. Who is the stakeholder that we're trying to reach at that time? So we've already met with the lobbyists. We had an event for them. We have a follow-up event coming up for them in early January. This week we've been focusing on legislators. In a few weeks, we're going to be focusing on those new cabinet members that are coming in, right? We're going to have new cabinet members coming in. We're going to have new elected officials coming in that are not members of the legislature. And then our fourth stakeholder group is the public, right? So we have those kind of education that has been tailored specifically to those particular groups of people.
And I can imagine it's very important that the media knows all this as well. So does the media qualify as the stakeholder group with the public?
With the public. We usually include them with the public. Okay. Yeah, we usually do. But you are right, because information can even get lost in media.
Well,
right?
And a lot of times, if somebody thinks there's something going on, they'll call a media individual.
Will call media.
I get phone calls all the time. It's like for a lot of people, that's their first point of contact.
It can be, yeah. So informing the media about what is and what isn't a violation, or what do you need to watch out for, when to come ask questions, those sorts of things, that is included with that public kind of information. But yeah, media plays a really big role.
Well, and as being part of the media sometimes, what's more important is knowing the right questions to ask. So if you're educated, you're going to know the right questions to ask.
You are going to know the right questions to ask.
That's the important part a lot of times when it comes to ethics.
It is.
So this event coming up at the Heritage Center, 6 p.m. on Monday, 12/9/24, public education session for the public, for the media, for anybody who is interested. This is an open forum. Come and learn about ethics in North Dakota and what the Ethics Commission does and what the process is and what a violation is. What else are people going to find out at this meeting?
So really, we're gonna talk about what role you play as a citizen, right? That we can't be successful in having an ethical and transparent government without you, and you play a crucial role. And by you, I mean all all citizens of North Dakota.
If you live in North Dakota, you play a role.
You do. Yes, absolutely.
So as far as the evening, kind of block off, 2-3 hours?
Oh, gosh, no. We're going to have you in and out of there.
5 hours?
Yeah. No. I'd like to eat dinner at some point. So it's from 6 to 7. That is when we have our kind of programmed time. And then we also have a little time for question and answer. If you have questions, we'll be there, have general information available afterwards.
So no cost to sign up?
No cost to sign up. It's open to the public.
If people want to reach out or find out more information, your website,
yes.
Where do people go?
So people can go to ethicscommission.nd.gov. The website that we have is full of information. So we have information on all of our upcoming educational sessions, all of our educational resources, all of our charts are there. If you have a question, you can submit a question online. You can submit basically any communication that goes through the website comes to us. And then all of our phone numbers, including the complaint hotline, is all listed on the website.
So once again, the website?
ethicscommission.nd.gov.
And public education session up at the Heritage Center Monday night, 6 p.m., 12/9/24.
Yeah.
Block off an hour, hour and a half.
Block off an hour and come be ethical.
Yeah, and learn. I mean, it's all about the education piece. Rebecca, thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Steve.
A lot going on with the Ethics Commission, a lot of things that people should know, whether you're an elected official, whether you're a representative, whether you're working in government, whether you're a voter. It doesn't matter. You should probably know all this information. If you're in the media, invite people in the media to show up to this as well. But it's going to be a great event at the Heritage Center to learn all about what the Ethics Commission does and really about that scope of ethics in North Dakota as we're heading into a new session. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Talk of the Town, weekday mornings starting at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app. Bismarck Mandan, Super Talk 1270.
Portions of the following program are pre-recorded.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk 1270, you're tuned to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Bakken, and I came across an article talking about, hey, is there a reinvigoration of a discussion that was taking place, 2010, 11, 12, on whether or not North Dakota should have nuclear power? Because the discussion at the time was all of the above. North Dakota's got all of the above. We've got hydro, we've got oil, gas, coal, wind, some solars out there too. What do we not have? Okay, well, we don't have nuclear, which is kind of ironic considering there's yellow cake everywhere out in the western part of the state, but right on the surface, but different discussion. So I thought I'd get a hold of one of my buddies, an old advocate of nuclear power, retired sub-driver, captain, retired U.S. Navy, Dwayne Sand, joining us in the studio. And Dwayne, you and I have had this conversation a lot in the past, different lifetime it seems like now, but nuclear, why does it make sense? And we see what's going on from a green perspective, whether you buy into that or not, but the conversation always comes back to nuclear, and is it safe?
Yeah, well, before we start with that, it's good to see you. This is my first radio interview in probably 6, 7, or 8 years. And I always...
been too long.
Yeah, well, when I was more active before I got so busy with my companies, I always used to be amazed at the voice of listening to a DJ like you, who's well-known as you are statewide, and then what they actually look like. So I want to compliment you in front of your listeners, you know, and how good you look. You lost weight. You look younger, actually, since I went to your wedding.
I still have the face for radio, though.
Yeah.
Can't fix that, Dwayne.
So, and you said old supporter of nuclear. Well, I am old. I'm in my late 50s now. So, but
not that far behind.
I'm still a huge proponent. And in fact, recently I testified in a joint committee in the legislature, it was about a month ago, an interim committee about why we need to bring nuclear here. And I laid it all out because and these are the same things I've said for 12 years. We need nuclear because everyone's going to need nuclear, and everyone in the Midwest has or had nuclear power already. And that includes your listeners in South Dakota. In fact, the very first commercial nuclear power plant in America was built in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Can you believe that?
Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, people don't know that. It was called the Pathfinder, and it wasn't designed really well. It was only in operation less than a dozen years, and who built it was...
But it was early technology. It was early on, so they were still learning about the technology.
That's right, and it was only like a 100-megawatt reactor at the most, and NSP, the predecessor to Otter Tail, is who built it. And so when they decommissioned it, they improved the design, made it bigger, and moved it to Monticello, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people drive by it all the time when they are driving down to Minneapolis, and you look off to the side of the road, and hey, there's that nuclear power plant.
And if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll miss it because it's behind a bunch of evergreen trees. But there's a nuclear power plant, you know, a couple 100 yards, you know, for the property from the interstate, and the storage of their spent nuclear waste is sitting right there, even between that plant and the highway. So it's all over the country. America, our country, the greatest country in the world, was the first country in the world to invent commercial nuclear power. In fact, here's another fun factoid for you. The person considered to be the grandfather of commercial nuclear power in America is Al Gore's dad, a Democrat from Tennessee. In the 50s, he told the power industry, coal, hydro, all those guys, he said, if you guys don't start building nuclear, we're going to start building them. And they got the message, and nuclear power, you know, building just rose sharply.
Wow, amazing family. So Al Gore's dad invented nuclear power for commercial use, and then Al Gore invented the interweb. All right. You keep saying commercial nuclear power. So, and I want to separate that because from a nuclear power perspective, a power plant perspective, you as a Navy guy, that's really where nuclear power kind of took off for purposes of powering things. And that's different from the commercial side of producing electricity.
Yeah, well, just as the commercial nuclear power industry was kicking off in the mid-50s, late 50s, Admiral Rickover in the Navy, anyone who's been in the Navy knows Admiral Rickover is the father of the nuclear Navy. And I've operated Navy nuclear power plants over a span of, close to 20 years when I was on submarines. And we use it primarily as a propulsion, right? But it drives everything else. I mean, there's main engines that are steam driven, and then there's turbine generators that power the electricity that we use in submarines. So nuclear runs everything on a submarine. In commercial applications, it does one thing. It goes to a big old turbine that generates a massive amount of electricity. And as you said in your opening, it's 100% green. It's the safest, greenest source of power generation in America, and it's the only green energy, other than hydro, that can actually power the grid. And that's what we got to do. If people want to operate electric cars and not increase the carbon footprint of America, they got to build nuclear because there's nothing else. That or hydro dams.
Well, and it's funny because with what the mandates are doing to stressing the grid, there is no sustainable or viable solution unless you're looking at nuclear.
Right. None. There's absolutely none. It's a joke. The unfortunately, I don't want to get too partisan, but the Democrat Party and the Hollywood crowd are still opposed to nuclear. And yet the Democrat, Al Gore Sr., was biggest part of the reason why we have nuclear. And now they've done a 180, but they're mandating electric cars and everything. But that just requires more coal and more natural gas to be burned to generate electrical power, which is all carbon. So you have solar, can't put it on the grid. You have wind, can't put it on the grid. You have hydro and nuclear. And we've been decommissioning nuclear at a crazy pace since about 20 years ago. We used to have 125, 30 commercial nuclear power plants. Now we're down to less than 100.
We're talking with Dwayne Sand, a retired U.S. Navy captain, talking about nuclear power. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Here. Super Talk.
It's the Ford SUV season sales event at your local Ford dealer. That's where you'll find great offers across the entire Ford SUV lineup, including Ford Escape, Expedition, the built wild Ford Bronco, and America's all-time best-selling SUV, Ford Explorer. Hurry in for amazing offers across a huge selection. This is Ford SUV season. Let's get going. Based on S&P Global Mobility 1946 through current U.S. total new cumulative registrations for all vehicles identified as SUVs. Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk 1270, you're tuned to Talk of the Town. We're talking with Dwayne Sand, retired U.S. Navy captain, submarine captain, and we're talking about nuclear power. And Dwayne, from where it started to today, you talk about some of the decommissioning that has taken place over at an accelerated pace over the last several years, but we're not putting on nuclear reactors and nuclear power plants anywhere near that or at all. I mean, it's almost non-existent industry right now, but it is the green solution if people want to talk about green technology. Where we started and where we are today, because people still think about Japan and Chernobyl and that's so far out of the realm of reality today in today's world. It's like Neanderthal day versus today. It's crazy how the technology's improved.
Yeah, it really is. A couple of things. There have been, 3 incidents. 2 are actually classified as accidents with nuclear power in the history of the world. commercial industry. The Chernobyl thing, which was designed by Russia, which I'll
enough said. Yeah.
Positive temperature coefficient, got hotter and became more reactive the hotter it gets, which is a bad thing to do. We have never done that in America. Fukushima, on the side of an ocean with tsunamis, very bad idea.
Just a bad place to put it.
Yeah. And then 3 Mile Island, which people don't even remember, don't really know, there was never a release of any radioactive material that left 3 Mile Island. It was all contained in the containment.
It did what it was supposed to do.
Exactly.
Did what it was supposed to do.
But, you know, that's not what Hollywood made you think, or Jane Fonda in that movie, The China Syndrome, made people think. It scared people about nuclear. It's ridiculous. So we've decommissioned 30% of the commercial nuclear fleet in America, or even more. We generate less power than ever before from nuclear. Since 1984, the only new nuclear power plants built are 2 of them in Vogel, South Carolina. V as in Victor, OGTLE, if people want to look it up. 2 new plants, the only ones in 40 years built. And the last one built before that was in Clinton, Illinois. And I've inspected that when I worked for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So if you go to any industry executive in any branch of the industry, in energy industry, knows and doesn't even disagree that nuclear is the safest and greenest source of power you can put on the grid. It's just Hollywood and America's personal opinion, public opinion, was against it for many years, until about 10 years ago. When George Bush was ending his presidency, there were 16, roughly, applications for new nuclear power plants. And I started working for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission out of Region 3, the Chicago office, in 2009. And so that was the first year of Barack Obama's term. And so there was, I believe the number was 16. It was at least 12, but I think it was 16. So in April of 2009. By the summer of that year, the only one left, everyone withdrew them. The only one left that stayed in the system for approval was Vogel, which got built literally 2-3 years ago. So think that's 10 years. It takes 10 years to build a nuclear power plant. We got to get started, because it's the only way in the future. And again, because it's safe and green. So why North Dakota? I mean, I told the state senators and state legislators this last month in the Capitol, if you draw a line from Winnipeg, Manitoba, down to the Gulf of Mexico, along all the borders of those states in the Midwest, every single state on both sides of that line has or had nuclear power plants.
Okay, before we get to North Dakota specifically, there's a couple things I want to unpack here from what you said. And first of all, it's the technology. So from a safety perspective, it's there. But the methodology for nuclear plants has kind of changed a little bit, hasn't it? Because it used to be this, you had to build this big nuclear plant, and it's massive, and it has the thought process kind of gotten into, well, we need smaller, more localized regional plants?
Well, yeah, so that's a different subject. SMRs are called, small modular reactors. But there's literally, as of at least last year when I checked last, and I probably should have done that for your show today, there hasn't been, as of last year, a single plan that's actually been licensed and approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So all the commercial nuclear power applications still to this day, just like Vogel built in South Carolina in the last few years, are 2,000, 3,000 total megawatts. These are huge, right? But the safety is much more improved, obviously, with computers and everything else and instrumentation. So it's a matter of how do you mitigate all the possible safety factors, right? What's one of them that I just mentioned with Fukushima?
Location. So, and that was where I was going to go next. So where do you put these? Because location matters. So from a safety perspective, you don't want to be right on the ocean within a tidal surge area if there's a hurricane. You don't want someplace with earthquakes.
Right.
You don't want someplace that's prone to wildfires. What are some of the other things that you should avoid?
Well, those are, and population centers, even though I think,
they're safe, but you don't want to put them.
But I mean, in northern Illinois, there's
you
13
can put a
nuclear
CO2
power
pipeline
plants.
right by population centers, and apparently that's okay. But different discussion.
That's right.
Sorry, I had to go there.
So, but and not to say you put it in North Dakota because no one lives there, and so therefore those sacrifice the people there. But
I remember some of our conversations back in the day. Is I'm like, why do we not have one in the Red River Valley?
Well, that's where it needs to go, and I'll tell you why.
Now, okay, so before we get into that, what do we need? So, you need water.
Yep.
You need, what else do you need for a good location for a nuclear power plant?
Geological stability, seismic stability, and the single safest location for seismic stability. The most seismic stable places in the United States of America are in North Texas and the entire state of North Dakota and northern Minnesota. But Minnesota is so anti-nuclear, they're never going to build a nuclear power plant. And we already, North Dakota, when I say we, already provides power to the grid that goes to Boston. How do we do that? Well, the grid that goes to Boston starts in Monticello, Minnesota, literally. I'm a pilot, as you know. I've flown the power lines that we push DC power, direct current power, from up north of Bismarck here all the way to Monticello.
Yeah, from Coal Creek Station.
That's right. And they use it on the grid that goes to Boston.
Okay, now we know what we need. Now we're going to talk about North Dakota next. When we come back from the break, we're talking with Dwayne Sand about nuclear power. And is it time for North Dakota to step into that space with all of the above power that we supply to the grid and that we use locally? Captain, retired U.S. Navy submarine captain Dwayne Sand joining us on the program this morning. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
1270, you're tuned to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Bakken along with Dwayne Sand, retired submarine captain from the U.S. Navy, and we're talking about nuclear power. And you recently had an opportunity to speak to the legislature and a bunch of politicians here in North Dakota to explain why we should be in that business.
Yeah, well, several. I'm and not listed in order of priority, but number one, we say we're an all-above energy state, right?
Except
we're not nuclear, so let's fix that, because we keep saying we support everything. Well, if we do, let's do everything. Number two, jobs. One single 2,000 megawatt nuclear power plant would create 3,000 to 4,000 jobs. What have we been saying for 50 years in North Dakota? We don't want our kids to grow up, go to high school, and leave. And so if we're serious about creating high-paying jobs that provide careers in a technical industry that keep our children in North Dakota, let's do that.
And let's establish right now, these are not jobs that Homer Simpson could occupy.
That's right.
Okay, just so we know that.
That's correct. So there's one. The other reason that Red River Valley is good is you got population centers, because it takes people. You can't just build a town in the middle of North Dakota and expect people to come anymore. To some extent, you need highly trained, educated people, and they're going to want to live near Fargo, Grand Forks. But why is that convenient anyway? Because there's cost involved in transmitting power. I told you we already, you stated, and you knew this already, we already ship DC power, which is much more expensive to ship per mile than AC power, and nuclear power plants generate AC, alternating current power. So if we got to send it to Monticello anyway, let's build it closer to Monticello than western North Dakota. So that's another reason.
Well, and that's part of it too, is our grid goes east. It doesn't go west,
right,
which I advocated for a long time. We should probably be sending power west, not to Minnesota. But
well, it's just you got to cover a lot of ground. So cost effectiveness is greater going east, being located in the east, and the geographic stability of the east is even more stable than the west. although there's not much different. North Dakota is very geologically stable.
Well, what about flooding? Because Red River Valley floods.
Yeah, Red River Valley floods.
So you got to be careful in where you would put it in the eastern part of the state.
And there's lots of places in the state, and they've been dealing with that for decades, 100 years, about how to dike protect, all kinds of things out there. My stepdad worked at the MCI bus plant in Pembina, where it's the worst flooding of anywhere along the way in the Red River Valley. There's sugar beet plants out there all over. I mean, people know how to do that. And you do have to dike protect things like that. But the biggest detractors who try to say, well, we don't have enough water, the Red River was dry in 1988. I remember I was home in the summer of 1988 on leave from the Navy as a volunteering as a boy state counselor at NDSU. And you could walk across the Red River, and they're like...
I remember in Fargo, you could walk across the Red River. You'd sink up to your butt in mud, but you could walk across the Red River in Fargo.
That's right. And so, having worked at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for 3 years, I have firsthand knowledge because I inspected the Clinton nuclear power plant in Illinois, and Dresden in Illinois, and Prairie Island in Minnesota, and Monticello in Minnesota, and a few more in Iowa. Here's the thing. We don't build them to take water directly from the rivers, directly from the rivers. So if the rivers go dry, that would be a problem if your only water source was a river. All the latest designs are for man-made cooling lakes with a pipeline to a water source if you need some makeup water. So
which is what they're working on doing with tapping water out of the Missouri River right now.
Exactly. So not only do you not need the Red River to be full of water flowing the whole year round, we are in the process within a year or two of completing a pipeline that pumps, I think, around 80,000 gallons per minute from, mostly gravity driven too, by the way, from Lake Sakakawea all the way to north of Fargo or near the Cheyenne River. I take that back. So we have a guaranteed water source, pretty much. As guaranteed as anywhere can be guaranteed, because nothing is ever 1,000% guaranteed. But so you don't need the Red River.
Just going back to the water for a minute, too, because there's a perception that people have about, well, you need this big water source for cooling.
Right.
Well, but the water used for cooling, it's a closed system with ponds and lakes you don't need that water flow constantly to cool, because you're not sucking it in, cooling, pitching it back out. It's kind of a closed system. They take in the water they need, and then that's the water they use.
Right. So there's some evaporation losses. There's a great example that I used to bring up to the Grand Forks Herald and Fargo Forum, which have endorsed this idea back over a dozen years ago already. And it's in Dresden, Illinois. That was the nuclear power plant I probably spent the most time in, next to Monticello, Minnesota. And it's literally on the confluence of two different rivers. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will, every year almost, ask Dresden Nuclear Power Plant to go to open system. You said closed system, where you have a pond, you heat water, and you let it run through this lake and cool off and come back into the plant. They asked the Dresden Nuclear Power Plant to open it up right to that river, the confluence to where the Illinois River forms in Illinois. And the reason they do that is they want that warmer water to go into the river to break up ice, so that what doesn't happen, Steve?
Ice damming.
That's right, flooding. And like, oh, what a great concept. We could use a nuclear power plant near the Red River in the Red River Valley to help prevent flooding in the Red River because of ice damming in the spring. What a great idea, huh?
Considering it flows north, that's a great idea.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, Canadians would probably complain a little bit.
They always complain.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of like the state of Missouri that sues you every time you try to.
But they can't really say anything,
Missouri.
because you're not adding anything. You're not changing the chemistry of the water. You're simply warming it and sending it upriver towards Winnipeg, that backs up because it thaws later in the year up there. And so it's a win-win. It's a win for the state. It's a win for our kids and our grandkids. It's a win for the green movement. It's a win for carbon-free power generation.
Well, having grown up in Grand Forks, anything that would help mitigate flooding would be a good thing.
Exactly. So I'm going to, until I'm completely retired, I'm going to keep this little movement alive as best I can. and try to increase it here as I get less busy with one of the companies I'm working with that I hope to sell soon.
We're talking with Dwayne Sand, retired captain, U.S. Navy, sub-driver, talking about nuclear power. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about why now and what do we need to do, and the discussion and the timelines and the things that are integral to why doesn't North Dakota have nuclear power. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
1270.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk 1270, you're tuned to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Bakken, along with Dwayne Sand, retired captain, U.S. Navy, former submarine captain, talking about nuclear power and why does it make sense now in North Dakota. And I want to go back to when you were working with the Nuclear Regulatory Agency before we get into the North Dakota side and why now. Part of the reason all of those applications were withdrawn during the Barack Obama administration when that started was because of the storage facility, right?
Yeah. So
or lack of.
Yeah, that's even more accurate. So in the early mid 80s, the U.S. Congress passed a law that President Reagan signed that said the commercial nuclear industry shall design and pay for, using the national laboratories, Yakima, Los Alamos, places like that, to design a facility to receive and store for forever and ever nuclear material, used nuclear material, nuclear waste, whatever you want to call it. And so for 20 years, they did that. When I was going into my senior year at the Naval Academy in college, for lack of a better word, I interned at Los Alamos, and my job was to write a database. This is before Excel and Microsoft and the internet that Al Gore invented. And I had to design it, and I wrote a database that stored all the minerals and trace elements for Yucca Mountain in Nevada. So about 2006, 7, 8, they completed it. It was ready to receive. And at that time, Harry Reid was the majority leader in the U.S. Senate, and Barack Obama got elected, and they were buddies. And so right away, one of the first 2-3 months while Obama was president, those two guys shut down Yucca Mountain in violation of U.S. law. And that's why the industry went from 16 applications for new nuclear power plant construction to 1, almost overnight. And so we got to do something, about that. Well, time has passed. We got a new president.
So storage-wise now, without that central hub of storage, now those facilities store on-site locally.
Right. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission had to come up with a plan. I worked on the plan to store nuclear waste on-site. And that's why we talked about in the opening part of the segment that you can see the casks storing nuclear waste at Monticello next to the highway. Not 10 feet away, but within a stone's throw away of the fence. So
can't we just shoot the waste into space and let it power our sun? And
I
so our
don't
sun
know about
doesn't
that.
eventually burn out.
But smart people. Hopefully, the American people, the public they've gotten smarter. The public is much more supportive of nuclear power. The NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, does polls. America's in more and more support of it because they know it's green, and they're in more and more support of green. When Doug Burgum first ran for governor the summer of 2016, I was talking to him one-on-one in his campaign bus right here in Mandan before the parade on the 4th of July. And he was very supportive of it. He hasn't done much in his administration, but I haven't talked to him since that day, so maybe he will be a part of the solution and pushing this nationwide. I know Donald Trump administration was on the verge of getting Yucca Mountain open again before the 2020 election, and of course he lost, so that got stopped because of the radical left-wingers in the environmental movement in the Democrat Party. So I think I'm hopeful, and we want to be at the front of that wave in North Dakota. We don't want to be in the back, playing catch-up.
So how was your message received when you spoke with the North Dakota legislators?
They asked some really good questions. They they said, what's the very first day? They had some lobbyists from, various states in here, and, that young, good, well-intended people that just don't know a lot about nuclear. But they said, well, you basically hire us to figure it out and come back to you, I got up to the podium and I just told them, you have to, the first step is a PSAR, a preliminary safety analysis report. It's the very first thing you do. It's the first thing that anyone does when you go to build something nuclear. You have to submit it to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And it's a study. And so I told the legislators, I recommended to them to, hey, fund this and let's get this going. Let's get a study done so that we can show the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, whose permission we need to build this, that this is a great place to do it. And that's the first step. And then within 10 years from now, we could have a nuclear power plant in North Dakota. So that's what I want to do.
Well, when you take a look at what's going on with ratepayers and all the stress on the grid, because North Dakota used to be overly abundant with cheap electricity, and now you take a look at some of these data centers that have come on, and look what it's doing to the ratepayers. It's increasing my rates because of some different industry pieces that the governor's put in place. I got to pay for that.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at what took place down in Texas, and we had some rolling brownouts in North Dakota because of it several years ago, that's going to become the norm. And when there's brownouts and blackouts in North Dakota, which has always been an energy-rich state, it's time to have another discussion.
Yeah.
It really is, Dwayne.
Well, in that same meeting that day, there was other discussions about that very same thing you just mentioned, and I'm glad you keep your listeners educated on that. Central North Dakotans, which is a large part of the state, even east, I don't know how far, we're all paying higher electricity because there's a shortage of it up in the Williston Basin, the Bakken. Mm-hmm. We're sending more and more power to northwestern North Dakota to power the oil industry, and it's causing ratepayers here in Bismarck to pay more.
It's not just the oil industry, but look at the data mining.
Exactly, all that stuff. Well, that's where it's all located. Yeah. And I'm not trying to pick on the oil industry. I spent a lot of time in the oil industry, so I love it. But we just got to get more power, and we got to get it to the grid so that we can actually say these electric cars on the road are actually good for the environment, because the more and more electric cars on the grid right now is worse for the environment. Because how are they getting powered?
Yeah, it's
gas turbines and coal.
Not going to work right now.
That's right.
So nuclear. So the study, and what's the next step as far as visiting with legislators and keeping that momentum moving?
It's all about having an advocate. There's not a lot of people who are advocates because they don't understand it. I need to start spending more time pushing it and engaging back with the newspapers in the East, the colleges, some of the towns. I had town hall meetings in all up and down the Red River Valley in 2012. They're highly supportive of it. I just got to do it, and then I got to find a PSAR, and I got to find a company like Exelon out of Illinois to want to build one here and spend the money, because it's a private-public venture, and we got to make sure the public policy supports it, which they do, I believe, and we got to get money to build it, because it's not cheap. It's $8-9 billion to build one,
but it's a pretty good investment.
Oh, it's a great investment, and it goes for 70 years as of now.
Dwayne Sand, retired submarine captain, U.S. Navy, talking about nuclear, and it's time in North Dakota, but you got to have that discussion, and it takes 10 years to build one. Let's start having that conversation right now. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Talk of the Town, weekday mornings starting at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app.